What's up everybody, Kyron Dudebro here, and we're going to talk about 2B's aggression step stance and the things it could do and why it could be bothersome, and also stuff that you have to look out for. I'm also going to talk about her other stance as well, because I've been hearing a lot of people have been having problems, and it can help getting some information, because 2B can be a little overwhelming if you don't understand some of her gimmicks or setups. So with that being said, let's get into it. So for starters, I want to start off by talking about the amount of different ways that she can go into the stance. She can go into the stance just by simply inputting it, doing the back sway version. She can also do options that will lead her into the stance itself, and it could be very, very oppressive because she has multiple ways to go into it. Even so, off of the air, she can do options that leads her while airborne, and then she can immediately just go into the stance and start a mix-up. So that's something you want to look out for. Another interesting thing that you also want to look out for is during the stance, when she is in it, she is actually crushing high attacks. So do that again. High attack will actually go right through her if you do not be very careful, and she could actually punish you for doing so. So that's just using an example, but once we go into the other moves, we can see why that would be very prevalent. Another thing that is also very dangerous is she can cancel the aggression step into the back sway. So she can literally go into the back sway and then go into that, but not off of this raw. If you do it raw, she can't do it. She can only do it if she does her other options, as you see here. The reason doing so is so problematic is because a lot of characters' counter pokes could be very short or stubby, and some characters' counter pokes are high attacks. So during in this situation, you could be in a situation where you're trying to counter poke and she crushes the high attack. Or if you're in a position where you're trying to punish it and your option is too stubby. The only way you're going to be able to punish it is you have to delay your punish. Doing it that way, you're almost guaranteed to get a counter hit confirmed. Some characters better than others, unfortunately. It also depends on the speed of the attack, but typically a lot of counter pokes are really fast and they're meant to be a very reactatory option for situations like these. If your character has really stubby ones, delay it. If it's not stubby, you should be able to do it off of this reaction, but be wary if you choose to respect it, because she has really good options off of this as well. With her first option being that she can cancel into her A through the back sway and continue to bully you around. If she doesn't want to do the back sway, she can always go here, get in and continue canceling. This is as if she assumes that you're going to do a punish and just keep bullying you around. Mind you, this is all mids. This is not a high attack, so you cannot duck this. If you're planning on GIing that option, be wary that the move comes out actually a lot later than what it seems like. So you may be able to rack based off of the dash itself, but if you're not careful, you're going to get popped anyways. You have to do this slightly later. Another interesting thing is because of the fact that it's considered a light attack, it is essentially a free punish if the 2B player does not decide to guard impact back. Oh, see, good example right there. As you see, it's considered a light attack because she falls down. So you should be able to get any launcher or most launcher or generic launches that your character has to get the punish, if she chooses not to GI. Another thing about this stance is that it tracks and is a horizontal as well. So there's no way of trying to sidestep this at all. But one good thing about this is it can be punished if you use your counter pokes. But it has to be a really reliable and quick one at that. Like I mentioned before, if your character so happens to have a high or a very slow one, I don't really remember the exact frames, unfortunately, so we're gonna have to, go to the assumptions. I'll leave more information in the descriptions. I apologize, but that being said, if your character has a fast enough poke that can stop that, then you should be fine because she's not doing the backsway. But you also have to be aware that if they do the backsway, you're leaving yourself open for another mix-up, unfortunately. So you have to be very wary on which options. If she does the backsway, you can do a long option to stop it. If she continues to go forward, you can do the counter poke. You have to pick or choose your options. One interesting thing about this is that this move will never knock down, regardless if it's counter hit or whatever. You'll always be left standing. For characters that has moves that auto GI for themselves, you should be able to have the option to parry it if you do it on block. So if you're blocking the first attack and you assume that she's going to do it again, you actually have the option to stop it. That's if your option is fast enough and is a mid. Our next option will have to be off of the dash. The B option. The B option is a low attack, a lot slower than the previous move that we've seen. On the contrary, what's interesting about this one is that this one does not track. So this is very sidesteppable if you assume that they're going to do that. What's also very strange is the first hit of this move is a low, but the second string forces standing position. So you'll be actually doing your standing punishes than your while rising punishers. So be wary of that. Just because it makes you block low, you should always remember that the second hit will cause standing. What's also weird is during flight, there's some strange properties. I would suggest that you just sidestep altogether just to be safe. There are cases where some moves will be beaten if she decides to continue mashing B afterwards. Some of them will decide to do the dash in the air, for example. They'll do this and decide to go maintain the air and go backwards. They could do that, but on the contrary, it's actually very unsafe on their part. So most of them just decide to do the B option, which will sometimes may or may not hit the opponent, which you should sidestep that. That way you can get your full punish. You could also GI as well, but the timing of that is kind of awkward. But, like her other move, this one is also considered, strangely enough, a light attack, so you can get your full launcher afterwards. Now, unfortunately, I wish that was the case, but there is also a second option she can do. During in that stance, if you decide to block it correctly, she can actually do this option right here. This option beats the sidestep, unfortunately. So you're put into a situation already. You either have to sidestep the vertical if you decides to do it, or you have to stand and duck the other option. This one's actually crouchable. But it's rather recommended to just block anyways, in my opinion. If you feel like you have the urge to try and go for the big guessing game, you could, but judging how this game is, it would be a big gamble if you were to get run countered just because you decided to take the guess. So you'll be taking more damage than what you were bothering. So most people would just rather block than take the guess. If you just do decide to just block the entire string of the vertical version, it is still unsafe. So you can get your 14 frame, I believe it's 14 frame Punisher. Unfortunately, for the other option, it's actually very safe. Her other option, which is more or less common or uncommon, will be the aerial approach AB. This option, she throws the robot on the floor and it does a bunch of chip damage. But if you're not careful, you could end up wowing like this. It does cause a lethal hit if she is so happen to have full guard. So if she hasn't taken any guard damage and she hits you with this, be very careful. This will lead you to a lot of trouble. But another thing, you cannot sidestep this. If you try to sidestep this, you also get effects. As for example, you will have to stand block. You can also crouch block too. But do not attempt to sidestep this move or any way or shape or form of 8-way run, where you will still get the same results. You will lethal hit without having to be counter hit or anything. Another thing that I forgot to mention is that her B option off of this is actually a true hit on normal weapons. So be wary of that. Also, the last thing until we move on to the next move is when she does this, she's not entirely at advantage. If you decide to do A, you can always challenge it with fast 12 frame K and you should be able to win. The only case that I see you be able to lose is if she decides to do maybe her 2A. Let's see. Because I believe that's one of her other fastest options. And even with that, you guys just trade. So you shouldn't let her get away with this. Next, 2B's other option is within the stance, or wave dash, what we're going to call it, is if you hold the B button. She does this option. She cannot cancel into another dash off of it. She has to commit to this. This move is also entirely very sidesteppable. So you can just do whatever you want. And safe free players will have a ball game with this because they can just get lethal hit. But also this attack is very well unsafe. It may appear safe in a lot of situations, but if you pay attention, it's actually minus 12. I want to say you can punish it with a kick. The punish isn't much, unfortunately, compared to what she can get off of a reward. This move automatically causes stun, so she can get a pretty generic combo or whatever she wants to do. I don't believe it'll be something massive because you're not launched, but it's something you should take in consideration. If you decide to GI this attack, unfortunately is not considered light. Also, again, be wary that this move comes out a little slower than what it may perceive. So this move is not light, so you won't get any launcher. Only generic AAs, maybe Ks, or 14 frame options. This attack is also as well a medium attack, so do not attempt to duck this, or you'll be put into a really ugly situation. Next will be 2B's K option off of that dash. This one is very, very popular. That pretty much is a rapid amount of punches, and you'll see this over and over. Interesting enough, it has the same problems like her A options. Once blocked, you should be able to get your quick punish if your character has access towards that. This move is a mid, so it's up. What's also interesting is that this move is, it looks like it shouldn't be sidesteppable. You can actually sidestep this. Also, what's also pretty cool is that it's considered a light attack. So when guard impact, you can get your punish. Not to mention that she also still has the same access as her back sway like the other move did. This one falls in the same place like I mentioned before. Now, something I also failed to mention before is she has the option to cancel into her other options. If you decide to do A or K, you can cancel into the back sway or the forward sway, but you don't have access to just those. You can also do the B option, but once you do those, you have to commit to the whole thing. Or if you want to do the whole thing and you're airborne and you want to go back into the dash, that's if the opponent is respecting way too much or is too afraid to push any buttons. Another thing that this move is very, very popular of is that it has an extended extreme. Typically, a lot of people fall for it because they don't expect the other stream, and if you're not prepared, you can get countered into all this action. So you have to be prepared, and it's something that you cannot guard in that. I'm attempting to do it, but you cannot guard attack at all. You have to guess the stream. That's what makes this one's dangerous. Is either that you don't press anything and she may continue her pressure, but even then you have the option to counter her and get your turn back, or that she does it, and here's what makes that move very frustrating, is that when she does it, she's actually safe, I believe. She's safe. That's the unfortunate part. So even if you do it, you don't get anything off of it, unfortunately. What's also very interesting though, because this game does this a lot, Soul Calibur has a really interesting way of balancing, is that because of the fact that it is safe, it is a high. So if your guess is correct, you can always punish it with a quick while rising attack. And it's something that you don't need to be afraid of doing either if you guess it. Mainly because of the fact that they all you have to do is immediately duck after. You can usually option select and just hold down back if you think they're gonna do it. The reason I say this is because if they don't, then they'll just move into stance anyways. So for instance, this is if they decide to do that, you can easily just continuously hold down back. Well, not hold, but press down back. That way, it gives you an option if you can guess the mix-up. If your character decides to stand, then you know that she's doing the other options. But if your character is crouching, then you know that she did it. So that way, you can just punish it accordingly. I'd say more experienced players would do this, but just note that if you don't want to do that, just know that the high attack, if you so happen to do it, you can duck under it and punish it. Here's a visual indication of what I mean. If the 2B player decides to do it, you just hold down during the moment you get attacked. Right now, this whole thing is in loop and random, so I actually don't know when she's going to do it. But the reason I say you should duck, not for too long though, is because there is a state when she is dashing. If she decides to dash, you have time to react to that. And you should be able to accordingly see which option is which. So if she does do the high, you can punish if you see it and react it. If not, continue blocking. Or go for the other options that I mentioned before and just use a counter poke. Next is 2B's dash command grab. This command grab actually tracks in both directions too.